And now let's talk about our elections, which people may not be aware of this. There is a presidential election going on right now. And the two candidates that we have that have a chance of winning are Donald Trump and Joe Biden. But you may have also been aware of Joe Biden's debate performance and what that did in terms of people's confidence that he is capable of running as a candidate. I mean, that really is what it comes down to. And on Friday night, I should say the Biden, I want to say administration, but it really feels like more like the Biden family right now, is desperately trying to prove to the Democratic Party that, in fact, he has not had a marked drop-off in his capabilities since the State of the Union, and that he is capable of being the candidate. Here is his interview with George Stephanopoulos. There was about 3 moments in it that I found problematic. This seems to be the one that I think people found the most problematic, was his answer to the question, what happens if you lose? Now, I want everybody just to take it in for a moment. So much of what we've talked about on this program has been about what happens if he loses.
The stakes.
The stakes, ladies and gentlemen. Here is how he answered that question.
And if you stay in and Trump is elected and everything you're warning about comes to pass, how will you feel in January?
I feel as long as I gave it my all and I did the goodest job as I know I can do. That's what this is about. Look, George, think of it this way. You've heard me say this before. I think the United States and the world is at an inflection point. And the things that happen in the next several years are going to determine what the next 6, 7 decades look like. And who's going to be able to hold NATO together like me? Who's going to be able to be in a position where I'm able to keep the Pacific Basin in a position where we're at least checkmating China now? Who's going to do that? Who has that reach? Who knows all these? We're going to have, I guess, a good way to judge me is you're going to have now the NATO conference here in the United States next week. Come listen.
Okay, there's a couple of things here. Let's work from the end to the front. This week is a big NATO conference in this country. It has clearly been the Biden strategy to delay as much as possible a reckoning, get to this moment where he can prove that this is his foreign policy chops are so unique, so powerful, that it is worth the risk for everything else that is involved in Donald Trump.
Yeah, but he doesn't seem to have a great assessment of the risk. There were other points in the interview where he repeatedly did not believe the statistics that George Stephanopoulos provided for him, both the fact that he is down in polling in all swing states and nationally. At this point in 2020, he was up many in the high single digits against Donald Trump, and that's part of how he won in 2020. He also did not believe his low approval rating. This is clear that he's struggling to cognitively, I think, understand the reality of the situation, which seems to be why Democrats are so concerned. And with that answer, look, I'm not a doctor, but he pretended that the stats weren't real, and he's undercutting everything that the Democrats are trying to portray accurately, the urgency of this election, abortion rights on the ballot, democracy on the ballot, by saying, hey, as long as I gave it my good old college try, things will be okay. No, they won't be okay.
Well, that is, I mean, okay. I don't know if that's a function of some type of cognitive disorder, but it is clearly the function of somebody who's lost the plot. Why? It's all speculation, but he's clearly lost the plot because, I mean, And I don't think that there's a politician out there who doesn't think about things in terms of themselves. But a politician who is on top of their game knows you don't say that. I mean, that's the bottom line. You don't say the election that we have been running as an existential threat to the United States. If I lose, the first thing that comes to mind is I gave it the old college try. Even if you believe that, especially if you believe that, you don't say that because you're in a campaign and your response is, it would be a nightmare, George. And this would happen, that would happen, this would happen. And I understand that I would sit there and I would never be able to forgive myself because I owe it to this country. I mean, look, this is all like
layups.
This is layup. And so the bottom line is, and that, combined with the idea that he's sort of in denial about the numbers, like you say, and just sort of the nature of the interview, pre-recorded, all of that is, et cetera, et cetera. That is, that did nothing to provide confidence for people, and particularly, I guess, in the Democratic leadership. And 2 days later, Adam Schiff, who is a member of the leadership, fairly low on the totem pole, but is part of the congressional Democratic leadership, he seems to be the one to have been sent out to send the message. Here he is on
Meet the Press.
Meet the Press.
To have you here, I want to get your gut reaction to that interview on Friday night. Obviously, the president trying to turn the page. Based on what you saw, do you think he is still the strongest candidate to beat former President Trump?
Well, ultimately, this is a decision President Biden is going to have to make, and President Biden alone. But I would say this, he has been an extraordinary president. He has created millions and millions of jobs. He has expanded and strengthened our NATO alliances. He has brought back manufacturing in this country. He has brought about the most aggressive attack on climate change. He has done more in one term than most presidents ever do, no matter how many terms they get. And he's running against someone who's a pathological liar, someone who ran the country into the ground by his mishandling of a deadly pandemic, someone who is a pathological, not only a pathological liar, but is immoral, indecent, and unfit for office. But the performance on the debate stage, I think, rightfully raised questions among the American people about whether the president has the vigor to defeat Donald Trump. And this is an existential race. Given Joe Biden's incredible record, given Donald Trump's terrible record, he should be mopping the floor with Donald Trump. Joe Biden is running against a criminal. It should not be even close, and there's only one reason it is close, and that's the president's age. And what I would say, Kristen, what I would advise the president is seek out the opinions of people you trust. He's obviously talked to his family about this, and that's important. But he should seek out people with some distance and objectivity. He should seek out pollsters who are not his own pollsters. He should take a moment to make the best informed judgment. And if the judgment is run, then run hard and beat that SOB.
Congressman.
That is remarkable. I watched that live, obviously. That's all I do these days. But I just was like, hell yeah. Because, I mean, look, we were seeing this in France. I know it's not one-to-one, it's a parliamentary system, but it was actually extremely encouraging, the fact that a lot of these centrist candidates dropped out, and even the left in reverse, in order for, in the second round, the France to defeat the far right and stave off their victories. There was a bit of an alliance formed. And I do see all of these like centrists, whether it be Adam Schiff or Mark Warner in power, who are starting to raise the alarm about Biden. And it's purely self-interested in the sense of like now Virginia, which should not be in play at all, is apparently in play because of Biden's age. And so Mark Warner is going to be concerned about that as well. But this is an opportunity, I think, for leftists and centrists to come together and say that we should not be going into a general election with somebody who's down in basically every swing state, putting states like Minnesota, New Mexico, Virginia in play when that was unthinkable months ago, and take a stand to stave off what could be a fascist red wave by Trump. And the stakes of Project 2025, abortion, democracy, it couldn't be more clear.
The other thing that really comes across here, and there was reports of this last week, right? We had mentioned this. It is quite clear that the leadership in the House and the Senate is a little bit upset that Biden did not come to them and reassure them in the wake of the debate, but rather essentially got into bunker mode with his son,
Hunter,
and his wife. Now, look, he loves his son. That's great. I maybe Hunter has much better judgment than we have assessed.
He has a resume. He's consulted for Ukrainian gas companies.
I mean, but I think there's clearly, for him to say, essentially, you're listening to your family, they're a little self-interested. Hunter in particular, I would imagine. You need to talk to people outside your circle and understand, understand what this is too. This is a message from Schiff, and not just Schiff, because there's no way this guy freelances. This is a message from the Democratic leadership. Look, we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. Mm-hmm. Don't make us all come out and call for you to step down. What we're watching right now is a huge game of chicken. Biden heard Schiff yesterday, and by say Biden, I mean the Biden, White House, and he released a letter basically saying, I'm in it forever. He also said during the Stephanopoulos thing that God Almighty had to come down and tell him, we will find out who amongst the Democratic leaders does or does not have a direct line from God Almighty himself. This is also that's also not a great answer in my estimation, although I guess maybe that's a little bit more politically savvy to claim that, you listen to God's will in this country. Appropriate, because we'll be talking to Brad Onishi in just a moment. But this is going to play out over the next couple of days. There was a small meeting of top Democratic House members yesterday, and apparently what came out of that was largely Biden's got to go. There's going to be a full caucus-wide meeting tomorrow amongst the House Democrats. There was supposed to be a similar meeting amongst Senate leaders. They canceled it because of privacy concerns, which seems to favor Biden on some level, right? If you're worried about leaks coming out of that, that means that some people who are afraid to talk about it, which means that they're afraid of getting Biden upset.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, there'll be a full Senate caucus meeting. We will know after that where this is going.
The problem is that as long as this goes on, the more we're not making the case about Donald Trump. And I think that the Pandora's box has been opened so that every time Biden steps out into the media at this point, there's going to be a conversation about his ability to speak extemporaneously, about the amount of time that he's campaigning, the rigor. It is a death by 1,000 cuts if we continue to go down this road with Biden. And I will just also make the case that Democrats understand that this race is set up actually quite well for the Democrats in the way that there's actually a plausible path to a supermajority in 2026 when the map is more favorable for the Senate. And also because in Arizona and in Nevada, two of the most important swing states, and that's leaving aside Florida, Montana, Arkansas, I believe, where Democrats could overperform, abortion will be on the ballot.
Yep.
And that's going to be a massive driver. And Kamala Harris was making the rounds this weekend, and there's limitations for her, I think, as a speaker and as a candidate in some ways, but I think that she would be a much easier case for the American public, especially with abortion being on the ballot. and maximizing female turnout as a narrative for the Democrats in the fall. And I think that's really the only option, because some sort of convoluted primary process, is that more democratic than, the person who was elected as the VP for an 81-year-old being the candidate? I don't think that's the case. So I think it's Kamala, it's Biden, or bust at this point.
Yeah, we'll talk more about the sort of the ideas floating around on who would replace Biden, but I think you're absolutely right. This is an election that the Biden administration, the Biden campaign set out to make a referendum on Donald Trump, and the problem is now that Biden is the story, and that's not going to change. And the only way that it may get less of a raging story is if he has no further absolute showings of what we saw at the debate stage. And they clearly don't think that he's capable of doing much without that showing up, or they would have had him out there every single day last week.
I mean, Sam, to speak to his capabilities, these images from Axios, where they take a photograph of his walk to a podium and print it out with says walk to podium so he can see what it looks like before that. I mean, this guy can't do it.
Yeah. I think the rigors involved, frankly, in campaigning and being president versus the rigors involved in either campaigning or being president are dramatically different. I mean, both those tasks simultaneously, I think, are far more problematic. I'm not as worried about him, being the president for the next 5-6 months. But I don't think that he's able to do both, frankly, effectively. So we'll see. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.